We begin this morning, of course, on former President Trump's historic federal indictment and what we will see today in a Florida courtroom.
We are just hours away from something this country has never witnessed before, a former president voluntarily surrendering to authorities to face federal charges. As you can imagine, security is ramped up in Miami ahead of today's hearing. Trump is expected to make his first court appearance on charges alleging that he knowingly and unlawfully kept classified documents after leaving the White House. Trump and his lawyers maintain he has done nothing wrong. The former president traveled from New Jersey yesterday to his Trump National Doral Resort in Florida ahead of today's hearing. He was greeted by both protesters and supporters. This all comes at a crucial time for the Republican frontrunner in the 2024 race, but he is still on the campaign trail with a birthday fundraiser set for later tonight on the eve of his 77th birthday. We have a full team covering every angle this morning. We're going to start with NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian in Miami and NBC News legal analyst Danny Savallo. So, Ken, walk us through what's expected to happen today. I think even if you don't have a law degree, you know that first court appearances tend to be rather short affairs. How long is this one expected to last?
That's right, Joe. Good morning. It's unclear, of course, but as we saw in New York, it didn't take very long. Mr. Trump is expected to enter this courthouse through an underground passageway, so it's unclear whether we'll even see him. As you know, no cameras allowed in federal court. The first thing he'll do is surrender and be processed by the federal marshals. And for a typical defendant, that would include being fingerprinted, mugshot taken, some other procedures they don't discuss. Unclear if all that's going to apply to Mr. Trump. I've been told all along it would, but look, he's going to be accompanied by armed Secret Service agents. He's a former president, so there's no playbook for this. At some point, he will move to the courtroom on the 13th floor here, where he'll have both, as you said, a first appearance and an arraignment, assuming that he has local counsel, which we believe he does. And so what that all entails is he gets to waive reading of the indictment, a 49-page indictment. Generally, defendants do waive the reading of that. He'll be asked for a plea to these charges. We, of course, expect that he'll plead not guilty. And then we'll see what kind of conditions, if any, this magistrate judge imposes. In a sense, there's a bond question here, but no one expects Mr. Trump to be ordered detained. It's possible, though, a bond could be set. It's also possible this magistrate could place certain restrictions on Mr. Trump. You know, typically federal defendants don't get to savage the prosecution and the court system and the FBI and call their prosecutor deranged without hearing from the judge in the case. Of course, Mr. Trump is running for president, so it's a different situation here. We'll just have to see how this all plays out. But high drama here in Miami, guys.
Absolutely. Danny, let's bring you in here on set with us. Ken just said something I want to follow up on there. He said, if he has local counsel, we believe he does. Walk us through the importance of that and what we're kind of looking for here.
There's been a lot made of the fact that Trump is heading down to his arraignment without local Florida lawyers. It is not a big deal. This is an arraignment. In fact, hypothetically, the public defender can step in and handle an arraignment. It is as bare bones as Ken just described. It might take less time to happen than it did for Ken to describe what happens at an arraignment, because you waive the formal reading. It's basically an entry of a not guilty plea. Interested to see if there are any conditions placed on him, but this is something that anyone can stand in for. And he doesn't just have anyone going down with him. He has Todd Blanche, who is a very, very experienced, very capable former federal prosecutor. He can easily handle an arraignment, even if he's not the planned ultimate Florida counsel that they have down there. I mean, it's always a good idea to have local counsel in a case like this. But the reality is federal court is federal court. These federal charges and statutes are the same nationwide. Somebody who is experienced in D.C. could easily handle an arraignment in Florida, no problem.
Ken, let's talk about the other big part of this story today, which is what is security going to look like for today's arraignment? Are there any worries at all about what's going to happen outside of the courthouse?
Well, Joe, of course there are worries, but the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security are reporting that they see no credible threats of organized violence, and that probably explains why, for example, the public street in front of me here, in front of this courthouse, has not been closed off. So the public still has access. There are barriers. There are a lot of security officers and vehicles here, but this courthouse was built to be secure. There are a limited number of entrances, so I don't think the worry is so much around this courthouse. The Miami police have said that they're going to deploy in force today. They do expect protests, and they will try to do whatever they can to tamp down any possible violence. private analysts who have been looking at pro-Trump social media say there are a lot of people vowing violence and vowing protest, but it's unclear how seriously to take all that. But of course, there is a heightened level of concern. It only takes one deranged person to really make mayhem here. So a lot of people watching, guys.
Danny, do you think that we might hear anything on the fact that the former president is pretty outspoken, both about this as well as his state indictment, all these different things we've seen? He gave an interview last night to a Boston radio host. He's talked about it on his own social media platform, Truth Social. Will we hear anything about that today from the judge?
Maybe not today, but what I expect will happen is that sooner or later, and this could happen in the New York State case as well, sooner or later, Trump will push the envelope. If he hasn't already, he may in the future, criticizing prosecutors, which, by the way, he should be able to criticize the prosecutors. He should be able to shout witch hunt. That's a form of political speech, and I expect there isn't a federal judge who wouldn't conclude that that kind of rhetoric is political speech. But it's also very close to the line of potential witness intimidation, other kinds of non-protected speech. The challenge for any federal judge imposing conditions is that they're dealing with a defendant who has an unprecedented public access to speech. It doesn't really matter as much if an unknown defendant is able to speak or not speak. Any judge is going to realize that this is a defendant who can affect not only the trial, but possible witnesses. And those are things that a judge has to balance. But if I'm a federal judge overseeing this case, I really shy away from this issue because it is thorny. It pits the First Amendment, not just any kind of speech, but political speech, directly against the importance of keeping and preserving a right to a fair trial. Because that's really what this is about. Ironically, you have to tamp Trump down in order to preserve his right to a fair trial.
All right. Ken and Danny, thank you both for kicking us off this hour. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now let's turn to NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns. She is outside Trump National Doral, Miami, where the former president spent the night. Hi, Dasha. Good morning. So let's talk about the political aspect of all of this, because this is not just a former president facing this federal indictment. It's somebody who's currently running for president again. And there has been mixed reaction from most of his GOP rivals, some who are kind of going after the Justice Department here, not the former president. But Chris Christie, who has made going after Trump a centerpiece of his own campaign, was pretty blunt last night. Let's listen to some of that.
It is a very tight, very detailed, evidence-laden indictment, and the conduct in there is awful. Then they come with a grand jury subpoena, and then, according to the indictment, you tell your lawyers, tell them we don't have anything, even though you have dozens and dozens of boxes of material. That's obstruction of justice, if it's true.
Dasha, walk us through what else we heard from Chris Christie, as well as just how this is shaping up to be a piece of this campaign for all the people that are running in this race right now.
Well, look, Savannah, we knew that Chris Christie was going to be the sort of bull in the china shop as he entered this race, that he was going to shift the dynamic because he would be the one candidate that would be very vocally and very directly going after the former president. What we didn't know was just how much this indictment would time up with his entering the race. And now he has this opportunity to sort of set the anti-Trump tone in the race. And the argument that he laid out last night was really that, look, the vast majority of Republicans who are supporting Trump are pointing to the Justice Department, pointing to the FBI, pointing to Joe Biden, pointing to the media. But he said, what about Trump? What about what he did in this case, which was, in his words, sort of an unforced error, where he is keeping these documents and when he knows that he is under intense scrutiny in this case. And so he's saying you got to look at the end of the day where the buck stops. The question is, does the tone shift for any of the other candidates? We did hear from Nikki Haley on Fox yesterday, where we did see a shift. She continued to make the argument that the DOJ and other government agencies need to be looked at under a microscope. But you said if any of this is true, then this is very serious, and this is a national security problem with these classified documents. So a tonal shift for Nikki Haley. Will that happen with any of the other candidates? Really hard to say at this point.
Absolutely. Let's also talk about the polls. This does not seem to be hurting him. According to those polls, he's still got a sizable lead obviously making him still very popular among Republican voters. I know you're talking to voters while you are out there. What are some of them saying? What are you hearing, Dasha?
Well, look, whenever the Trump base sees that their guy, sees that the former president is getting attacked, they rally, right? And we had some of our teams out talking to some of the voters that were outside waiting for his motorcade to pass by, and here's what they had to say.
I know there's allegations of him trying to hide stuff. But what about Biden?
Yes, residents, citizens, we're fed up with this. It's going to be a large turnout of supporters at the courthouse from all over the U.S.
Now, these are supporters. There are voters who are getting sort of fatigued with the endless legal problems that Trump is facing. And so those are the folks that the other candidates who are trying to chip away at that Trump base are going to be going after. They're going to be saying, look, while Trump is dealing with this legal headache, we're out there, we're knocking on doors, we're making progress, talking to the American people and saying how we're going to change their lives. So we'll see if that argument works, or if Trump is Trump and that big wall of support is just too hard to climb.
And Dasha, quickly tell us what to expect after this. We know Trump will head back to Bedminster for a fundraiser. What might we see and hear from him?
Well, look, if you talk to any lawyer or legal expert, they will tell you that this is the most serious legal problem that the former president has faced. But if you look at how Trump and his team are playing this, they are playing this just like every other challenge that they have faced in the past, whether it was the first indictment, whether it was any other lawsuit that they've faced. They're saying that they are the victims here, and they're making the argument, Trump is making the argument that they're not going after him, that they are going after you. They are going after the American people. That is his message, and it really resonates with his base. And so I expect that you will hear something very similar in his message as he uses this, as we've seen in the past, to raise money for his campaign, and he uses this to boost himself politically, even if it's a hit legally.
Dasha Burns, we know you'll stay on it, of course. Thank you so much.
Let's bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale. Ali, good morning. So we have heard, of course, plenty of reaction on the Hill to this Trump indictment, mainly along party lines. We are hearing again from House Speaker McCarthy. What is his take?
Well, look, McCarthy is saying this time what he said the last time that Trump was indicted, which is still a stunning statement. But lawmakers now, to the extent that this is normalizing, have a playbook for this. McCarthy drawing from that, as many of his House Republican colleagues are, by pointing to a two-tiered system of justice and making these points yesterday with reporters in the halls. Watch.
What about those pictures? Was that a good look for the former president to have boxes in a bathroom?
I don't know. Is it a good picture to have boxes in a garage that opens up all the time? A bathroom door locks. You know what concerns me is you have these, a lot of these documents behind a Corvette in a garage with the door wide open.
So you're watching McCarthy there, of course, trying to equivocate between what's happening with former President Trump and the investigation that President Biden is currently under for the lesser number of classified documents that were found at his home and his and one of the universities that were holding his Senate documents and documents from his time as vice president. But look, that equivocation is part of the point. For Republicans, and what's so interesting about the question that McCarthy didn't engage with there is whether this is a bad look from the former president and the substance of what's actually being talked about here. I think what's striking is that Republican reactions, at least on the congressional side, haven't changed very much before the indictment was unsealed and after the indictment was unsealed. And that's because they're not contending with the substance of it, unlike people like Chris Christie, a former prosecutor himself, who can look at this and see things in it that they point to and say, this could be pretty bad for Trump.
I mean, so Ali, McCarthy is certainly not the first Republican to try and draw comparisons between Trump and President Biden when it comes to their handling of classified material. Remind us what the White House has said before about the Biden case. Explain why Republicans are making these comparisons.
Look, Republicans are making these comparisons because both Trump and Biden had special counsels assigned to them for the finding of classified documents here. It's the same thing that we saw for former Vice President Mike Pence when he was found to have a small number of these classified documents. His case is now closed. The difference here, though, between Pence and Biden and Trump Pence and Biden being on this side and Trump being on the other, is that Trump did not hand over these documents when repeatedly asked for them. And we see in this indictment at one point, he says that he, A, doesn't want anyone going through his boxes, and then B, asks his lawyer if they can just say that they don't have the documents in question. That is something that prosecutors can look at as obstruction. And it points to the thing that Senator Mitt Romney has said about this consistently, which is he doesn't understand the why here. Why Trump didn't just turn this over, because in some ways that makes this a crisis of Trump's own making. He could have just turned these documents over, which is what the Biden team and frankly the Pence team would say that they did.
Allie, very quickly here, what are we hearing from Democrats on the Hill ahead of the arraignment?
Very little. And that's because many of them are pointing to this as a process that should play out. They're not trying to hyper-politicize this to the extent that it can be any less political than it already is, but they're taking their cues from the White House, especially on this, many of them pointing to the fact that there cannot be anyone who's above the law, and that's why they're watching this process play out as it is.
All right, Allie Vitale, thank you so much. And we will have much more on the arraignment of former President Trump throughout the day here on NBC News Now. And NBC News will carry a special report this afternoon of the arraignment when it happens. You can watch it on NBC and NBC News Now.
Well, now let's get to the latest on that highway collapse in Philadelphia. Authorities in the area are saying the effects of the collapse could potentially be felt well beyond the city of Philadelphia and for months to come. Here's NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa with more.
Commuters in a crunch after a fiery crash that collapsed a critical section of I-95 in Philadelphia.
Out of control here. You know?
Thick plumes of smoke emanating from an accident involving a tanker below that authorities say was carrying 8,500 gallons of gasoline Sunday morning.
What can you tell us about the circumstances leading up to the vehicle fire?
The tractor and trailer was trying to navigate the curve, lost control of the vehicle, landed on its side, and ruptured the tank and ignited the fire.
The commercial truck crushed by the collapse. Pennsylvania State Police confirming a body was recovered from the wreckage.
And you can see just how massive of an undertaking the rebuilding process will be. Crews right now clearing out 500 tons of debris.
I-95 is the East Coast's main highway, stretching from Florida to Maine. And this section typically sees 160,000 vehicles a day. Now severed, the transportation secretary warns both commuters and the supply chain will feel the impact.
This is going to be a major disruption in that region, and it's really going to affect the whole Northeast.
All right, pulling up where 95 is closed now.
Standstill traffic snaking along I-95 as drivers brace for longer commutes, and the interstate closure funnels people onto local roads.
This is a way that I would never take to work under normal circumstances.
The devastation is reminiscent of an interstate failure from a fire in Atlanta back in 2017, worsening the gridlock for weeks. Steel girders supporting overpasses like the one in Philadelphia can become vulnerable when exposed to flames. According to engineering experts, steel loses about 20% of its strength at 750 degrees and half of its strength at 1,000.
If you heat up the structural material, it gradually softens, it loses the ability to carry the weight that was above it. And as a result, we can have damage to the bridge, and in extreme cases, you can have full collapse.
Our thanks to Emily Aketa for that report. Well, yesterday, the governor of Pennsylvania signed an emergency disaster declaration to get federal funding to fix that highway.
Time for a look at your morning news now. Weather forecast. Severe weather is impacting a big part of the South.
Angie Lastman is with us and has all the details. Hi, Angie. Good morning.
Hi. Good morning, guys. We've got some quiet conditions out west. We've got a little bit of rain working through the Great Lakes and parts of the Northeast. And yes, we do have the potential for some strong storms to develop basically from Texas all the way over to Georgia, including parts of the Carolinas and, of course, Florida. Now, 19 million people are at risk with this. The main hazards are going to be the large hail as well as the strong winds. The good news is that tornado threat is very low through the afternoon and evening hours today. But I do want you to be aware of the hail threat because we're talking tennis ball size or larger. So from Dallas all the way to Macon, you'll want to be aware of this into the afternoon. And again, even after the sun goes down this evening, that'll be something that you deal with. And it's not just a today problem. It's also tomorrow, too, that you'll want to have a way to get those alerts alerts because we once again will be seeing an elevated risk of some of these strong to even severe storms developing into the afternoon and evening hours. Tomorrow, too, same kind of impact, same hazards, the hail, the wind, with that tornado threat low, but we can't rule out, of course, an isolated tornado, so just be aware of that. Here's the area for hail that could potentially develop into your Wednesday. Now, this is the system that we're continuing to watch. You can see some of these thunderstorms rolling through into the afternoon hours and evening hours today. It's fairly stationary, but still we'll be watching for some of those showers up near the Great Lakes, but this is the one that really is going to have the rain with it, packing a punch when it comes to heavy rainfall, and that risk for flooding will track into the afternoon and evening hours today and through the next couple of days. Through the Great Lakes in the Northeast, rather, this is just a good kind of soaking rain. We really need it. Part of the drought conditions across this area will hopefully be improved. Maybe an inch in some of the more widespread spots, maybe up to 2 inches in a few spots. But down through the Southeast, a different story. Localized amounts up to 8 inches possible. Wow. It does include places like Montgomery and into parts of Georgia and near Jackson, Tupelo. We could see some heavy rain. So just watch for the flooding concerns. That'll be something that we deal with through the day today. Places like, again, Montgomery to Savannah have that slight risk for flash flooding. Meanwhile, check out this heat, guys, in Texas. It is a scorcher down there. And it's not just today. These are triple-digit temperatures from San Antonio, San Angelo, heading to 103. Some of these feels-like temperatures this afternoon are going to be 108 and maybe even higher. And look at these actual high temperatures in places like Del Rio through the end of the week. 109 on Thursday and Friday. You add in the humidity, you're feeling really warm, really uncomfortable. So just taking it easy. If you have any strenuous activity to do outdoors, make sure you're staying hydrated in those spots, especially for the kiddos that are outside. A much different story through the Midwest, though. We're below normal. 68 degrees in Detroit, low 70s in Pittsburgh. Two different stories there.
Very different. All right.
Yeah, so much going on, as always. Angie, thank you.
This morning, basketball fans in Colorado are celebrating a historic win for the Denver Nuggets. For the first time ever, the team won the NBA title.
Yes, I got a lot of friends in Denver who had a fun night. Well, it was a two-time MVP, Nikola Jokic, who led the charge. The Nuggets snagged the Game 5 win over the Miami Heat in a 94-89 victory. 28 of those points were scored by Jokic, who was also named MVP of the finals.
Yes, it was a home game. This was the scene outside of Ball Arena in downtown Denver last night. As you can see, no surprise, hundreds, maybe even thousands of fans poured into the streets to celebrate, some of them setting off fireworks along the way.
The fun is scheduled to continue on Thursday when the city holds a parade and rally to mark the historic moment.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.